Hi, it's Friday, January 5th, 2024. Welcome to this very special edition of the Zogby Report, Real and Unscripted. It's very special because this is the day that we enter actually our 5th year of doing this podcast. Amazing. How are you doing, Jared?
I'm doing even better after hearing about that.
Yeah, and there is so much going on. And Iowa, we need to talk about Iowa, and then later you've got some brand new numbers that you want to share. But let's get into Iowa and let's respond to one of our actually longtime friends, clients, and viewers of this podcast, Hank Waronin, who suggests that we talk about Nikki Haley and what Nikki Haley's chances really are. So, are you game for that?
Yeah, that's a good conversation.
Okay, so let's do it. So Nikki Haley, as we all know, is about tied right now. One poll has her in second place in Iowa, but both she and Ron DeSantis are falling way behind Donald Trump. You move on to New Hampshire. New Hampshire's a very important state when it comes to primaries and caucuses. And Haley's doing better. In fact, one can argue she's at least running a closer second place to Donald Trump. And in a couple of polls, you might even argue a close second place to Donald Trump. And then, right after that is South Carolina, her state, where she's putting up some respectable numbers. However, let's look at this expectations game. I have already laid out that in terms of Iowa, Ron DeSantis has to win. He's visited every county. He has spent to the tune of $250 million. He's been talking about winning, not placing, not showing, but winning. And he's doing poorly, in fact, even slipping in New Hampshire. And so a close second by DeSantis or a third place, I believe, would be fatal for him. Nikki Haley has to come in second. It has to be a strong second. And I don't mean a 40-point difference. She's got to come within 15, 17 points of Donald Trump. Trump has to be hurt in that polls are showing him at around 50% in Iowa. He's got to come in the high 30s or 40 to show some real damage, while Haley comes in a respectable second in the high 20s or low 30s. Tall order. It looked like she was heading in that direction, but then there was a serious gaffe. And the thing about serious gaffes, this time it was about slavery, was how she handled it. She was thinking like a Southern candidate, thinking like a MAGA Republican, mindful that she can't go too far out on a limb, but she was historically inaccurate and historically inept. And her excuse that the questioner was a plant, well, welcome to the presidential campaign. There are more plants there than the botanical gardens in Brooklyn. And so she blew it. And you'd say, well, it wasn't fatal, and it need not be, but it stopped her in her tracks, stopped her in her momentum, rather than the story being Haley making gains and being very good out there. It became the ineptness of her response and maybe a slowing of momentum. And so the stakes are very high for these two candidates. And that's how I see it. What do you think?
Well, that's a good argument. I'm not just doing this for the sake of playing the devil's advocate, but I really wonder how much it was that moment, right? The thing is as we've seen in this cycle, as in a lot of cycles, but let's focus on this one. As soon as somebody on the Republican side gets a 2-point bump or a 5 percentage point bump, the headline on Drudge is I'm exaggerating, but maybe not so much. Massive spike among Vivek, massive spike among Haley. And I think that that's more or less a projection of desire from the media pundits, that they want to see Trump falling and that they want to see somebody else, not so much Ron DeSantis, but another Republican. I don't think that gaffe helped Nikki Haley, but I don't know that those who are on the fence or those who may be open to another candidate necessarily that destroyed any chances. I don't think it helped anything, but I don't think it was fatal. I think that there's something fundamentally underlying that is likely to prevent Haley from skyrocketing. I do think look, anybody getting second place in Iowa and doing so within 10 or 15 points is good. That rolls over. That can be momentum. But I think the underlying factor or force here is that enough of Republicans don't think that they didn't think before the gaffe, and they don't think now that Haley is a formidable challenger in the Armageddon election. What is driving this is the stakes are high. The historical forces are such that we have arrived at the present moment in this country where we really are at a fork in the road. But there's three options, right? The larger forces playing out, I think, are forces pushing the United States and the rest of the world towards globalism, or towards remaining a country with national sovereignty, or I think a third option, less popular, but nonetheless very much prevalent in our political landscape, the country breaking up, right? I mean, that's playing out. That has played out on the European continent and elsewhere. Certainly, there's a history of it here. Those are the three options, and that puts America at a very pivotal, epochal moment of we will never be the same after this election. And I think because of that reality, I don't think a Nikki Haley rises to the occasion with the stakes so high. I think, look, Nikki Haley is a pro. She's a good politician, but she's two-dimensional. She is your typical politician who was probably class president, who knew at 16 she wanted to do something big, whether that was be an ambassador or even be a stateswoman or even be president, and has scripted her life and has built her resume for it. And that worked for a long time in this country. But I think we broke from that in 2016 as America gets closer and closer to this epochal, pivotal fork in the road moment that will redefine us forever. And I think Trump, this is my last point here, Trump fits the bill more because, number one, he's time tested. You know what you're going to get with him. There is an element of surprise with Trump, and that MAGA voters love that. But you also do know what you're going to get. You know that with a Trump presidency, he's going to reinstate the Keystone Pipeline. You know that with a Trump presidency, there's little question among his supporters that there will be a strong border. And remember, it's not just Republicans now. It is independents and even Democratic voters who are recognizing that the southern border is a humanitarian crisis and is a crisis born out of the Biden administration. And I'm not attacking, I'm just saying that is a reality. And then, of course, you have inflation. And I'm not saying that Trump is the gold standard when it comes to economics, but the perception is from the average voter that the years 2016 through 2019 were golden ages in comparison to 2020 going forward, which looks a lot more dystopian, even to the average independent voter, more or less. And so I think because all of that boiled down to the phrase, the stakes are so high, Nikki Haley, a good, solid politician, but not somebody who I think can outperform Donald Trump in this pivotal moment. That's what I think is the real backdrop here.
Well, you and I clearly go to different sections to peruse books in the library. I can tell you that. And that's brilliant. I don't agree, but it is brilliant. So here's a cautionary note about judging candidates versus judging presidencies. Arthur Schlesinger Jr. once posed a very poignant question, very simple one. Would Lincoln have been Coolidge had he been president in the 1920s? And would Coolidge have been Lincoln if he was president in the 1860s? We don't really know that. I mean, you think of a one-term congressman like Lincoln, a corporate attorney like Lincoln, and someone who made a name for himself in debates against Stephen Douglas, all of a sudden now becoming president of the United States. Meanwhile, on the other hand, you have a Vermont-born governor of Massachusetts who gains national fame during the 1919 strikes after World War I, particularly the police strike in Boston, and takes a hard line against the strikers and becomes vice president and then accidentally becomes president, but a president during peace and prosperity. We don't know, what a Nikki Haley will be or do, just like we didn't know Jack Kennedy. Maybe still don't know Jack Kennedy as much has been written about him, but he's certainly listed among the greats, even though, doors were open to him automatically from the time that he was a child. All right. Anything else on Nikki Haley?
Well, I mean, just to answer to that, and I mean, who am I to challenge Arthur Schlesinger? But I think a better analogy would be, would Lincoln have been FDR in 1932, and would FDR have been Lincoln in 1860? And that's kind of a rhetorical question. The answer is yes. The times make. There is a great historical debate. Does the man or the woman make the times, or does the times make the man? But I think in the case of 1860 and 1932, the times certainly made the president.
Absolutely.
And so that's just a different take on that historical observation. But yeah, I just don't see coming from Trump and what happened in 2016 and 2020. I think Nikki Haley would have to really up her game. That's not to say that she's reached her ceiling and that she can't build further momentum and seize the moment. She could, but thus far, she hasn't really shown that she's more dynamic than what she's already displayed. And I think that is probably what is why we're at where we're at today in terms of her polling.
Okay, so no predictions here, but it looked to me like there might have been a shot for her to, and she still might come closer in Iowa than the expectations had suggested. But she seems now to have been slowed in her tracks. But we're going to revisit Iowa. We're going to do a couple of more of these podcasts before the all-important caucuses. Now, you've got some fresh polling numbers that you want to share.
Yeah, I did. I guess I can still do that. Why don't we just, since we're already talking about Iowa, and this isn't, by the way, the Republican primary. This is the head-to-head, Trump versus Biden, and today, I mean, it should be no surprise. Iowa is red. Trump is leading Biden 51-39. What's very interesting is looking at by party, 17% of Democrats say they would vote for Trump, 82% for Biden. I think that's catastrophic. Among Republicans,
and this is Iowa now, right?
This is Iowa.
Yeah, that is not good. It's a Republican state. You know, it's not it's not a battleground state anymore, but that's not good.
No, that's not good. And so what about within Trump's party, the Republicans, 83% back. So they both get 82. Biden gets 82 from Democrats, 82%. Trump gets 83% from Republicans. But here's the difference: only 6% of Republicans say that they would vote for Biden. Remember, 17% of Democrats said they would vote for Trump. And so the independents, there's just an edge for Trump. 45% of independents go with Trump and 43% go with Biden. And so that's interesting. I don't want to go, I have more states, but because Iowa is, right, the first, or at least historically has been the first, and that's where as you've always said, the media, the money, and the momentum rolls over into the next. Why don't we just leave it at that?
All right.
Unless you have your commentary.
This is very competitive between two men that the American people don't want. That's what makes it even more intriguing. You've laid out, these are my closing remarks for me. You have laid out the high stakes in this scenario. You know, the overall umbrella is the rapidity and the comprehensiveness of the change that's taking place in our lives. It's all encompassing. And, you know, I have said elsewhere and on this podcast, it's going to get a lot worse before it gets a lot better. But whoever the leader of the United States is during this rocky period is going to have a lot to say about what happens on the other end of this change. I think we're going to be okay no matter what, but I do think we're going through a rocky period. And I do know we have a clearer picture of what Donald Trump will do, and I'm not liking it one bit. But apparently a lot of folks don't like either of these two candidates. Yeah.
And you know what? I've got some BOTUS data. I figured I should be generous here. So real quick, Michigan, okay? Swing state, very key state. What's going on in Michigan as of today in the two-way? Overall, Trump 47, Biden 44. I'll do the same thing here. Let's look at Biden's party. 91% back Biden, 91% of Democrats, 8% back Trump. What about on the Republican side? 90% of Republicans back Trump, only 4%, half, okay, of what's happening in Biden's party. 4% of Republicans say they'll vote for Trump. The independents decisively in favor of Trump, 44% of independents for Trump, 34% for Biden. So we have right there Iowa and Michigan, of course. It's a lot different in other states. I'm sure in New Hampshire, Biden could have an edge or is very close. And Democrat states like Maryland, I'm sure, in fact, I know Biden is ahead. This is just a slice of the early states looking at general election voters.
It's very competitive, and we're going to be following it. But we'll do some Iowa first and some more from our poll in our next podcast very soon.
You got it.
Have a good day. Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye.
You too.